Hello, I'm Lauren Reddington, Programs Director for the American Solar Energy Society, and I would like to thank you for joining us for our monthly webinar series. To kick off, I would like to inform you of who ASES is and highlight some of our current events and programs. The American Solar Energy Society is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was established in 1954 and advocates for sustainable living and 100% renewable energy by sharing information, events, and resources to cultivate community and power progress. You can join our community at any time at ases.org/join, and webinar registrants get a special 10% off discount on all ASES memberships, excluding life memberships, by using promo code webinar. Early bird rates are still available for registration to our 52nd Annual National Solar Conference, Solar 2023, Transforming the Energy Landscape for All. The conference will be a net zero emissions event and held in Boulder, Colorado at the University of Colorado Boulder and online in a hybrid format from August 8th to 11th, 2023. Head to ases.org/conference to register, view the conference schedule, and check out the visitor's guide. The 28th Annual National Solar Tour is set for October 6th through 8th, 2023, and will feature a collection of local tours and tour sites with solar and sustainable technologies across the US. Signups are open to host a tour site or local tour, so head to nationalsolartour.org to sign up. ASES also invites you to participate in our online community. This is a space for our community to collaborate, share content and information, and network with each other. The online community is also home to our Mentor Match program, which facilitates mentor and mentee relationships in the interest of enhancing personal and professional development. I encourage you all to head to community.ases.org following this webinar to continue the discussion. Thank you for listening to these ASES updates. I want to note that this webinar will be available in a recorded format soon. I will follow up with everyone once it is available. I will ask that you submit your comments to the chat section and questions to the Q&A section. All attendees will be able to see the questions submitted to the Q&A, and you can upvote the questions you would like to see answered. We will do our best to review and answer everything at the end of the presentation. Now I would like to introduce you to today's presenter, Otto Gunderson, freelance clean energy reporter. Otto graduated from the University of Virginia, class of 2022, with a degree in history. He has been involved in clean energy, specifically solar and circular economic practices for 4 years now, and has been writing about clean energy for 2 years. Due to a lack of writing on the clean energy transitions in South America and Africa, Otto decided to spend his 2023 traveling across these continents, interviewing clean energy entrepreneurs, researchers, and disruptors, and publishing their stories. Along with publishing stories for Solar Today and Clean Technica, Otto is running his own site to further discuss the global clean energy transition. That can be found at globalenergystories.com. Now I'll turn it over to you, Otto.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to do my best to share my screen now. Hopefully this works out. Is that good?
Yep.
We all set? Perfect.
Great.
So very quickly, I will say, if you hear a delay or something, that is probably not you guys. It's almost certainly me. I'm in Medellin right now, so pretty far from just about anyone who's in Colorado or anywhere like that. To kick off, I'd like to say 2 quick thank yous. The first is to ASES. When I pitched this project to them back in September, a lot of people had said no. They said people wouldn't be interested, but ASES got on board really quickly. I was really grateful. They really offered to do the webinar right away. Were really supportive, agreed that this was something that needed to be discussed. And I'm excited to say I also have an article coming out in the ASES Solar Today magazine. So I'm really grateful to them and the support that they've shown this project. The second is to Sam Vanderhoof, who I know is on the call. He was the first person that really introduced me to the clean energy world. It gave me my first opportunity to write about clean energy. And this project really would not be possible without his mentorship and the support he's given me. So thank you so much. So moving on really quick. Lauren, I guess that introduction was perfect. It was everything I was going to cover, so less time of me talking might be good. But yeah, really, I graduated from school having written about clean energy, but knowing that I really wanted to still be able to learn about clean energy while traveling. And I was doing some side research on energy in South America, and I realized that very few of the energy blogs or sites that I visited on a daily basis were writing about renewables in South America. And so I decided, you know what, when you see a problem like that and you see an opportunity to fix it, I thought that would be a good way to spend 6 months. So I've been down here since January, trying to write and educate people in both the US and in Europe about what's happening down in South America in regards to clean energy. So I say South America. I've been to, or I'm going to five countries, so I can't even say I've been to half. And as you can see, that's the route I've taken. I pulled that from the website, bit of a roundabout. As you can imagine, the bus rides from places like Ecuador to Buenos Aires are not something you want to do more than once. But it was due to I was supposed to start in Peru in January, but because of that unrest and something that I'll be discussing later, I had to change up my plans a little bit. But really, it worked out wonderfully. I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I'm hoping to in a couple months' time, maybe come back down and look at what Brazil and Bolivia and Paraguay are doing, because that's also really exciting and really underreported. So I'm going to start by just giving a little background, maybe a disclaimer. This is a carbon continent. We are looking at across the board, a heavily reliant oil, natural gas, and coal continent. Maybe Uruguay, maybe Costa Rica and Central America. There are places that are really moving, but the majority of these countries are still very reliant on these carbon heavy energy sources. And I think I had the belief coming down here that the goal was always to just lower those percentages as much as possible. If you can do that, then you're doing the right thing, you're reporting on the right thing. But it's not as simple as that. I think that I had the habit of judging it from maybe a U.S. point of view or something like that, where I thought transition to clean energy as quickly and efficiently as possible, and that's the goal. But it is the poor and rural communities across this continent that are a lot of times really reliant on subsidies for this oil, this natural gas, this coal. And so the transition in all these countries not only needs to be rapid to hit their milestones that they're going for, but it has to take into account these communities. So I would just like to point that out before I hard sell on clean energy. First off is hydropower. It's really not something that I had written about in the past. So when I got down here and I realized that is really, at least in the Andean countries, Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador, hydropower has been their clean energy response for the last 15 years. Every one of those countries is over 55% of the electricity that they generate is from hydropower. And I mean, Ecuador just has approved 25 new projects between 2013 and 2022. Now, I know that there is a lot of discussion across the world about whether hydropower should be considered clean energy. But compared to the amount of coal and oil and natural gas that they were using, this is really strong progress. However, when talking to people in the hydro sector, as well as reporters in these countries, they're saying that this reliance on hydropower has really disrupted any opportunity that they've had to expand on wind energy and solar energy. And part of that is economic. You see right now that these countries are taking massive loans from almost exclusively Chinese banks and building these billion-dollar projects. And on the surface, we're seeing that that's working, right? They are using clean energy more so than ever before. but it's also causing problems. A lot of times the due diligence that's required to build these may not be done. In the case of the Coca-Cola Dam, they're seeing droughts now. And then on top of that, we are seeing labor disputes. We are seeing vastly more expensive projects than were previously anticipated. And we're seeing a growing reliance on foreign construction materials and information. The goal for the clean energy sector is not just to transition to clean energy, it's to build these economies in these Andean countries that really have been struggling over the last 20 years to find that stability. And this reliance that they have on Chinese investment, Chinese workers, and now selling their oil and their natural products to China to pay for these is causing some serious disruption in their economies. So I know this is the American Solar Energy Society. I'm guessing of all the presentations they do this year, this one might have the word solar the least, which could be concerning for me in reviews, but we'll see. But as far as non-traditional renewables, so solar and wind across the continent, the growth that we're seeing and the excitement behind it is palpable. I mean, we are seeing, for instance, Chile, for the first time in their history, in 2022, they produced more of their energy from solar and wind, 27.5% than coal. And this is wild because in 2016, Chile produced more coal and used more coal than they ever have in their history. So we're talking about in 6 years, a transition to these energies that I can't think of another country that's seen that. And part of that is due to the fact that you would be hard pressed to find areas in these countries that have the access to solar and wind than anywhere else in the world. For instance, both Peru and Colombia outscore the US on solar potential. The Atacama Desert in Chile has some of the highest radiation in the world, and the south of Chile and Patagonia has some of the best onshore wind potential in the globe. I mean, their onshore wind potential is better than almost anyone else's offshore wind potential, and they're finally taking advantage of that, which is really, really exciting for the deployment of wind and solar energy. In the case of Argentina, I mean, we're talking about one of the highest consumption rates of carbon-heavy energies in the world. They are now starting to take initiatives to build up in North Argentina, the Jujuy province, the Cauchari project, which was finished. You can see it down on the bottom right of your screen, which was finished just earlier this year, and actually is getting expanded. Has well over 1 million panels, provides energy for 260,000 homes, and it's also in the north of the country, one of the poorest and most rural areas. They are getting consistent clean energy for quite cheap, while it provides infrastructure, jobs, and attention to these regions. And the same goes for Colombia. The Guajira wind farm in Colombia can now power 33,000 homes. This wouldn't have been thought of 15 years ago, but people realize that the Colombian coast is some of the best wind power in the world, and that's really exciting. So if I were predicting, I think that we're going to see over the next, 15, 20 years, some of the highest rates of solar and wind deployment in the rural areas of South America. And I think they will quickly become the gold standard a lot of time for clean energy, much like Chile already is. Now, I think I've given you, I tried to do an overview on both the good and the bad, but there is so much that I've seen down here that's just really exciting to hear about and read about. It's the kind of projects that I came down here because I felt like they weren't being reported on. And so one of them, I was given the opportunity to talk to a Chilean startup called Cleanlight that is working to bring solar power to what are traditionally very carbon-heavy and dirty industries in Chile. It started with mining. And now they are in They have 1,900 clients spanning 6 countries, and they're expanding in all across South and Central America and even North America. And part of what's so exciting about this is not only that they're bringing renewable energy to these areas, but also that they are doing it to industries that are traditionally not seen as renewable friendly, but that are really getting behind the transition. And that we're seeing this renewable energy, especially solar manufacturing, starting to happen in Chile. Talking to a lot of these government officials and supporters of renewables, one of the biggest things that keeps being brought up is that there's no manufacturing. There's no clean energy manufacturing almost across the continent. So everything that's brought in is imported, taxed, expensive, and doesn't build the infrastructure. But these solar and renewable manufacturing companies are promoting clean energy in their regions, providing jobs to their people, and growing the economy and providing stability. So that's the more we see of that, and the more the Chilean government and other governments begin to really support those initiatives, the quicker we're going to see this transition. Another project which is quite different, but was also really fun to research and interview and write about, was the Permer project in Argentina. You would be hard pressed to find an area where there is such a divide in wealth. Actually, you probably wouldn't be hard pressed if you maybe put in a map, but between rural communities, especially in the mountain regions, and cities like Buenos Aires and Mendoza. And the government realized this, and they realized that these areas need electricity and they need it to be renewable. And they started this initiative that is providing solar energy, whether it's panels or roofing, whatever it is, we're seeing them power entire towns. But we're seeing them focus on schools, hospitals, churches, community centers, and agricultural practices. These are the kind of things that they not only now provide all these people with electricity, they create a bond with the people to help promote both government stability, but also the view of renewable energies. In a lot of this region, especially Argentina, but in other places, renewables are still viewed as far too expensive, a pipe dream, an idea by these wealthier areas like the US and Europe that may not come to fruition in 4 years in Argentina, but they are working to change that. And it's projects like the Perma project that are making that possible. Another thing we're seeing is a transition, a political transition. So we're seeing new presidents, such as Guillermo Lasso in Ecuador, such as several across the region that are now signing in and getting fully behind renewables. So I think there's definitely political reasons to be excited, and part of the reason that's such a relief is because of the turmoil that they've faced politically. And so with stability and support, it's going to come investment. It's going to come grid infrastructure projects, and I'm really excited to see how that transitions. So one thing that I've noticed is that I'm talking to people in renewable energies, a lot of the time the US and Europe and China, they are viewed as the forefathers, the people who are doing it right. Whether that's true or not, a lot of times it is, sometimes it's not. It's up for maybe a different, longer webinar. But one of the things that people bring up to me, especially people involved in electric vehicles and municipalities, is the effect that public transportation is having, electric, clean energy powered public transportation is having on these cities. So you look at Santiago. Santiago currently has the largest fleet of electric buses outside of China. But right next door, you have Bogota, which is, well, I guess not right next door, but which is right on their heels. And there's, I think, some sort of friendly competition, because Bogota by the end of 2023 is expected to have the largest fleet. And, hearing about this and hearing about how much it was talked about, I was a little skeptical. It seemed that compared to these massive solar farms and these large wind farms, these electric buses and maybe electric taxis, didn't seem like they would be that important. But as it turns out, when you are in the most or the second most urban continent in the world, this pollution that these internal combustion engine cars have in these cities is massive, cannot be overstated. So if 81% of people in South America live in cities, then there's a huge need for clean public transport. And part of that problem is that South America, and especially these cities, release more emissions from the transportation sector significantly than anywhere else in the world. The world average is 22% of carbon emissions are from transportation. South America is 35%. But part of what's so inspiring about stories like this is these countries, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, now Buenos Aires and Argentina, they don't have the infrastructure that we have in the States, where we can have the Build Back Better initiative, or the infrastructure plan where there's trillions of dollars worth of government funding that are going to these EV charging networks and tax incentives for consumer vehicle purchasing, things like that. These countries know that they need to make a change, as big a change as they can, where they can, as efficiently as they can. And they said, where can we do that? Buses. But not only buses. We are seeing them electrify taxis. We are seeing them electrify major fleets because they are more likely to move around in cities, vans. And so we're seeing a reduction in these emissions without the resources that maybe Western Europe or the United States or China has. They're solving complex problems with a fraction of the resources. And so that's it's a level of creativity that is really exciting to learn about. Talking to these EV specialists down here, you are proud for them of the work they're doing, and you are really excited to see how it's going to keep spreading. So this goes into what is needed. So my tradition when I would give these interviews, well, they were in Spanish, and sometimes they were very quick, depending on the accent. Chile and Argentina was rough. But it is what is needed, right? What is going on in this country, or maybe broader? If I was talking to a reporter who specialized in the Andes region or the southern region, what is needed? And it was four main things. The first I touched on briefly, manufacturing. Talking to two different CEOs, they both mentioned that the cost to import and the tariffs and the supply chain issues, getting these valuable materials from the United States or Europe or China, is putting a strain on it. But not only that, there is this feeling that that they are importing a solution to a domestic problem. And so that is why promoting manufacturing and promoting the creation of their own solutions is really starting to take hold. It's growing really popular. And I think that as we see some of these other things that I've listed come into play, we are going to see a lot more manufacturing. So the second one is grid infrastructure. And that is the most common thing that's brought up to me. So if you look at that map of Argentina or of Argentina down there, you are going to see that almost all of the it's in red. I know it might be a little small. All of the really high powered wind area is in the far south of the country, and that is not a surprise. That's the Patagonia region, and that is where they have some of the most powerful gusts of wind in the world. The problem is they can't connect it to anywhere. I was fortunate enough to speak to the past CEO of the largest wind producing company in Argentina, and he said that every day they have a problem. They're talking about how are we going to get grid infrastructure, get solid infrastructure projects that connect the high population cities, Buenos Aires, Mendoza, wherever it is, with these massive projects down here, and it's very expensive. It's hard to sell for any political party, but it is absolutely necessary. And I know because I have people that I've worked with in the past in the States who talk about the critical impact that the grid plays on the US infrastructure. Comparatively, ours is wonderful. I mean, I was in Buenos Aires for a month and I saw blackouts that would last 3 hours in one of the biggest cities in the world that would cover half the city. And it's such a prevalent problem that the government is actually starting to enforce laws on these power suppliers if they don't meet regulations. And to go further, they are not building these new infrastructure lines. Under the last administration, none were built. And so talking to these people who own these big wind farms and want to build more of them, and these investors, how can they expect to ever be sustainable and make a profit if they have no way to connect all of this power to these major areas that need it so badly? So that is something that, whether I'm in the north of Ecuador or the south of Chile, grid infrastructure is the biggest, most talked about problem in clean energy in South America. Moving on, legislation and subsidies. South America, I mean, Argentina, you still see 5% of the entire government budget going to subsidies for carbon, for coal, oil, and natural gas. These clean energy companies do not have the ITC tax credit to sell. They don't have the government support that Europe has had, that the US has had, and they're really struggling because of it. That has been something that's really commonly brought up, is that people in the clean energy sector feel like there is an alliance between the government and natural gas and oil that is these subsidies are squashing any possible transition. I remember I was speaking to a climate reporter in Colombia, and he said, how are we supposed to do it? We get no help from the government. But not only is it an even playing field, the government is actually supporting natural gas and oil on a high level. So I know that recently in places in the States and places in South America, they've said, well, actually, per kilowatt hour, solar is cheaper, wind is cheaper. That may be true. But if the intrinsically created problems in South America and alliances between carbon producers and the government doesn't change, we are going to keep seeing subsidized oil and natural gas that is going to harm both the solar and the wind industry. The last thing I will touch on is probably something that all of you guys have read about, and that is stability in South America. I can tell you that I had to change. I was supposed to be in Peru and on January 9th. And a few days before that, I had to change because there was massive political problems. And when I talk to entrepreneurs in these countries, they say that they're constantly worried about political upheaval, political unrest, changing policies, changing legislation. Just a few examples. Peru, you have 6 presidents in 6 years. How are you supposed to get solid solar, wind, hydroelectric, whatever it is, policies? And not only that, we're seeing that these projects, you build a massive solar farm or especially a hydroelectric project, that's several years and billions of dollars of investment. When you see governments that are changing that, not only do you not want to make that investment, you are going to find no outside investors who are going to want to make that investment, apart from one, which I will touch on my next slide. I'm sure that's not a hard one to guess. But as far as legal certainty goes, a guarantee of political stability, a guarantee of support by the government has been one of the most mentioned things during my interviews. and coming down here, it's not surprising. And the last thing I'll touch on, because I was just in Argentina and I was looking through my wallet and I have about 70,000 Argentinian pesos is inflation. It is really hard for these areas to gather foreign investment when the currency changes as constantly as it does. And so that goes into legislation, that goes into political stability. But if Argentina or Peru or Colombia, they want to see that maintaining of their currency, then they are going to need to. That is what they're going to need to do before they can really see high level investment from the U.S. or Europe. So I just a few. I know I'm coming up, and I got to do some Q&As and everything. But there's a few things that I wanted to just let everyone know. If you see an article, keep an eye on it, because these are things that I've written about and things that I think are going to play a role not just in clean energy, but in politics, economics, whatever it is. And the first is Chinese investment. I know I mentioned it, but you are seeing almost every major project financed to some degree, whether almost entirely or maybe 70% by large Chinese banks. So, for instance, Ecuador alone took out $19 billion under their last president from China to build infrastructure projects. That is staggering. And what that does, not only does it mean Ecuador and China have signed agreements, they are as close as possible to being trading. But what they're seeing is that there are problems with some of these Chinese construction companies that are really, really undercutting the work that they're trying to do in clean energy. For instance, in the Coca-Cola project or some of the other dams we've seen through, you're seeing higher costs than were previously anticipated, which for a country that might be struggling economically, have problems with poverty, that is really putting a strain on it. You're seeing non-compliance, especially when it comes to areas with natural resources. The due diligence is not being done. The guarantees that it won't harm the environment and the landscape sometimes aren't happening. And you're seeing claims of corruption and payoffs, and that's been a problem. And you're seeing labor claims. There were dozens filed at some of these dams about these construction areas. The other thing I'll touch on about this is that these Chinese investments, when I speak to these reporters, these banks, they're not worried about clean energy. It is understandable, but they want to make money. So it's kind of funny. I was talking to Fernand Coop, who's an amazing reporter from Diego Chino, and he mentioned that China will have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars invested in the same country, some of it in a solar project to the north and some of it in an oil field to the south. Now, it might be said that, okay, well, at least there's some investment in clean energy, and that's fair. I mean, the US is not investing in these projects. Neither is Europe, not nearly on the scale China is. But it is the fact that it's so little based around clean energy means that these banks need to be wary, or these countries need to be wary about what the goal is and how it's getting done. But that does offer a quick route to more clean energy, and that is if these governments and this new legislation about telecom, if this is successful, and suddenly the way to make money in these countries is to invest in solar and in wind, we are going to see skyrocketing levels of investment from China in exclusively clean energy. And while that may cause socioeconomic or political problems for the United States, we are going to see a very, very solid level of investment in these renewable projects. And that is something that has been repeatedly told to me as a problem, is a lack of investment. So now I will touch briefly on some of this legislation that has been passed recently, and that is proving to be very effective, very exciting, especially in Chile and Colombia. And the first is the Chile Climate Change Framework Law. I mean, they are guaranteeing carbon neutral and working tirelessly to be carbon neutral by 2050. And that is, I mean, astounding for a country that was producing more coal than ever in 2016. And for a country that is still seeing some economic unrest and unrest with with perhaps the future inflation, the investment that they've made in renewable energy is really impressive. And part of that is the population. It is universally accepted in Chile that clean energy and the climate change is a massive problem. A study done on 168, 172 countries found that Chile, almost across the board, was in the first, second, or third when the population was asked questions like, should the government have a role in stopping climate change? Will climate change affect future generations? Is this a problem that needs to be addressed now? Chile has given such strong support, the populace has, to climate change that they're able to pass laws like this. But not only are they able to pass laws like this, they are making the strides necessary to be climate neutral in 2050, which is wonderful. The same law was passed by the Colombia Climate Action Law. I believe it's still up for debate. But we're seeing some of these countries that don't have that infrastructure that the United States has, where they can put trillions and trillions of dollars towards it, that don't have the wealth of Europe or the manufacturing policies of China, but are making the same commitments that these other countries are. And to do that, like we said, they are getting creative. I mean, that's all there is to it. They are, whether it's the buses in Colombia, whether it is the off-grid projects that we're seeing in Santiago or Costa Rica, they are trying to reach the same goal with fewer resources, and they are doing a really impressive job. Now, Colombia and Chile are not everywhere, but we are seeing smaller policies being not only passed, but really working in places like Argentina. The Mader Law comes to mind. Finally, we are seeing massive companies having power purchase agreements with renewables. And speaking to people in Argentina when they talk about their fear of corruption or the divisions within the country, the fact that these companies can now work directly with energy producers rather than having to always go through the government is really well received and is prompting dozens of new projects being supported and having their PPAs signed before construction begins, which is really exciting work. The last thing that I'm going to touch on is climate reporting, and that's partly because of the amazing climate reporters that I've met while I've been down here. Really passionate about their work and really exciting. And part of it is I think there's a level of danger with what they're doing that I don't see in the States when we look at all these amazing blog sites and websites and societies like ASES. The strength and the control that the big oil and big coal areas control is really astounding. But these climate reporters, they're going to these projects, they're reporting on things like non-compliance at these dams, or links between corruption and oil, or even things like searching through documents and finding out, okay, how can we possibly expect to transition to renewable energies when our government is so much more dedicated to providing subsidies to oil and natural gas? And that has been something that I have been continuously impressed by and really lucky to see. So I'm very grateful. That brings us to the end, right about 20 minutes left. So hopefully I ended that right about when you guys were looking for. but I'm happy to take any questions. And once again, I'm just so grateful for everyone who came out and listened. And once again to ACES, this has been a great opportunity to speak, and I've been looking forward to this for months now. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, everyone go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A and have a question here from Gregory. Do you plan to visit Bolivia and Brazil in the near term?
I am hoping to do a trip to Brazil at the hopefully at the beginning of 2023. That is a country where they have more hydroelectric than almost anywhere in the world. But it's also a country where, if you want to talk political unrest, the effect that that's having on investment, that has been really large. Bolivia would be amazing as well. I've spoken to several people who report for clean energy in Bolivia, and I'm hoping to. Unfortunately, I'm actually going to Africa to do the same project starting in September. So it will have to be after that. But I would love the opportunity to go to both those countries and work, because the work that's happening in both areas is really impressive.
And what people or organizations finance your travel?
Yeah, so part of it is Clean Technica. I'm fortunate enough that they supported me. I got paid per publication. And the second is I picked up another job. I work for a startup several hours a week from UVA, based out of Chicago, to make money. But I would say this. I think the reason that I've been able to do this is because I've been willing to stay at hostels for $6 a night, and I certainly don't have expensive taste. So I would say I'm really grateful to Clean Technica, really grateful to Jensel, and I think that their support has been the world to me.
Drew asked, do you see any evidence of US or Europe projects?
Across South America, I think we are starting to in places with more stability. So Chile, we're starting to maybe see some US investment, maybe Colombia as well, but just shockingly low compared to, I think both the US and Europe are doing amazing work in their own countries. But right now we are not seeing it, and we need to. And I think that comes down to a lot of things. It's going to come down to maybe grid transmission support. But one of the things that I found most interesting was a conversation I had with an EV specialist who said, look, in South America, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. The work that's being done in the US and Europe, while it might not be investment, the knowledge gained and the new technology and the fact that they are paving the road is going to make the transition in South America that much easier when the money becomes available. So are we seeing the level of investment we need right now? No. But is the amazing work happening in the US and Europe going to help this transition? Absolutely.
And what role corruption plays in these clean energy projects?
When I talk to people in the US about clean energy, I feel like I almost never hear the word corruption. When I talk to reporters in South America about clean energy, I would bet my plane ticket home that you are going to hear that word within the first 2 sentences. There is, it's the fact that oil and natural gas have such a big control over the government. It's the fact that they're so entrenched, and it's the fact that in a lot of these countries, especially Argentina, but you'll see it in Ecuador and Peru as well, a bit of fear around clean energy. Maybe not fear is the right word, but a belief that it's expensive and unrealistic. And so you combine all of that together, and I would say the corruption, for the most part, it seems to go a little bit unnoticed when it comes to clean energy, unless you are working or writing about that sector directly.
And are there any NGOs contributing to the implementation of clean energy projects in South America?
Oh, I know that there are. One comes to mind right now, and it's slipping my mind, but I would be happy to follow up with that. But there absolutely are. I think it's more in the education sphere. I know that universities in the U.S. work with universities in Argentina and Chile in regards to clean energy. You'll see a lot of collaboration between both educators and intellectuals on clean energy. But I know that there are initiatives, especially in rural areas, that are US supported or European supported, that are providing off-grid projects, water salination projects through clean energy, things like that you absolutely are seeing, and I'd be happy to follow up with that.
And how have Chinese gotten around the corruption issues?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of things. Really, what it is, it's in essence, they are the available money. It was announced. It was written in actually a great article by a reporter that I worked with down here. He mentioned it to me. Essentially, it feels like it's free money for people, for some of these governments in South America that really need wins early on because of the level of unrest, but really low, very readily available money for relatively low interest rates. And so it seems a little bit like, at least for a while, the government was willing to turn a blind eye. Now, you see in some of the projects in Ecuador, the government will come in and there will be investigations, and there will be the withdrawal of permits and things like that. But I think when these governments are looking around for infrastructure projects, and there's 20 billion available from China, they are willing to overlook a certain level of problems when there's very little available anyways.
Well, thank you so much, Otto, for your fantastic presentation. Really appreciate you joining us today. And thank you all for attending this month's webinar. Hope you'll join us next month, and you have a great day.